Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, co-presented by SBI Mutual Fund, a partner for life. Skoda Superb, best in next class. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist. Amstrad, get real, get Amstrad.
China has banned WEON in the mainland. Chinese diplomats have blocked us on social media. The Chinese embassy in Delhi often criticizes our coverage, calling us some media, quote unquote. But now they have directly written to us, telling us how we should do our coverage. The trigger was an interview with Taiwan's Foreign Minister Dr. Joseph Wu. He spoke about China's military threat and the leadership challenges that Xi Jinping faces, China's role in the Wuhan virus outbreak, the cover-up and the culpability. He talked about testifying against China in an international court and Taiwan's improving ties with India, the opportunities that two democracies can explore together. None of this was to China's liking. So they shot off a letter telling us to respect the One China policy. The same China that has been violating the One India principle and trying to capture Indian land, remains engaged in a military standoff with India for months, is now preaching us on how to respect sovereignty. How does this even work? Tonight on Gravitas, we tell you why one interview has rattled China so much. Also on the show, NATO must take responsibility for Turkey's actions. The world should push for one peace process under Russia's leadership, the Prime Minister of Armenia tells WEON in an exclusive interview. 10 days before Election Day, the last debate of the presidential battle took place today. Less chaos, lots of pot shots. We'll bring you the highlights. The UK has removed Sri Lanka's LTT from its list of terror outfits. On what basis? We'll discuss. And Arsenal has benched its star player Mesut Ozil. Is there a Chinese hand in this exile? He'd spoken out on the Uyghur issue. We'll begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Stepping up pressure after U.S. intelligence pointed the finger at both Iran and Russia, United States has slapped sanctions on 5 Iranian entities for what it called brazen attempts to interfere with the U.S. election. Pakistan to remain on the grey list of FATF as it has been unable to comply with 6 of the 27 points action plan. Pakistan has been on the grey list of the Paris-based global terror financing watchdog since 2018. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has warned protesters not to undermine national security as he avoided addressing the shooting of demonstrators after days of unrest. The broadcast was Buhari's first public statement to the nation since security forces were accused of gunning down peaceful protesters in Lagos on Tuesday. Fear of economic recession, confusion and curfew is gripping the minds of Europeans. France's economy may contract in the fourth quarter, as confirmed by a French minister. Ireland has become the first country in Europe to impose a countrywide lockdown. Germany, Denmark, Portugal and Italy all registered their highest one-day tally since the pandemic began, while a night curfew was imposed in Lombardy after coronavirus cases doubled in one day to 4,126. Germany has deployed the army to assist contact tracing, and Spain's hospitals are battling a tsunami of COVID patients. Plasma taken from the blood of recovered COVID-19 patients that is given to people sick with the disease does not reduce their chances of getting seriously ill or dying, according to new research from a study in India. The US and India, battling the world's worst outbreaks of COVID-19, have both authorized plasma for emergency use. Environmental organization says dangerous levels of carbon-14 exist in water that could soon be released into the Pacific Ocean. According to a Greenpeace investigation, contaminated water that will reportedly be released into the sea from the wrecked Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant contains a radioactive substance that has the potential to damage human DNA. The American fashion chain Gap plans to operate in Europe through partnerships amid fashion chain's crisis. The company is considering closing all of its 129 company-owned stores in Europe and a distribution center in Rugby next year, potentially putting hundreds of jobs at risk. Gap, which has more than 70 stores in the UK and 4 in Ireland, as well as outlets in France and Italy, now wants to operate in Europe through partnerships, potentially both online and in stores. Thousands of dead seal pups were washed ashore on the coast of Namibia in October, as conservation experts warned that more were still being found. Footage taken by Ocean Conservation Namibia from October 15th shows the coast dotted with more than 5,000 dead seal pups. The pups were found at Pelican Point Peninsula, a tourist destination in Walvis Bay known for its colony of seals and school of dolphins. More fetuses were still being discovered, estimating that as many as 12,000 in total had been aborted by their mothers off the Namibian coast. North London giants Arsenal and Tottenham Hotspur made winning starts to their Europa League campaigns. Arsenal faced a scare against Rapid Vienna as a defense mistake gifted the Austrians a 51st minute lead, but David Luiz and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang turned things around to secure a 2-1 victory. Meanwhile, Tottenham Hotspur cruised to a 3-0 victory in their opener against Lask Linz. On loan striker Carlos Vinicius set up goals for Lucas Moura and Son Heung-min on his debut, while Spurs also benefited from an own goal. Italian giants AC Milan continued their perfect start to the season by beating Celtic 3-1 in their Europa League opener. Radaj Krunic headed the visitors into the lead in the 14th minute, and Ibrahim Diaz made it 2-0 just before halftime. The Scottish champions deservedly pulled a goal back in the 76th minute, but Norway's Jens Petter Hauge sealed the win with a late goal.
Difficulty that Xi Jinping is facing, according to you?
There are quite a few difficulties China is facing right now. Seeing the Chinese economy have been trying to beef up freedom and democracy.
We've got mail. It's from China. It doesn't say anything new, but it makes for interesting reading. The letter written by the Chinese embassy in New Delhi to WION's editor-in-chief Sudhir Chaudhary shows how rattled Beijing is. The trigger was an interview. 2 days back, we got you an exclusive interview with the Foreign Minister of Taiwan, Dr. Joseph Wu. Late last night, we got a protest letter from China. Why should such a correspondence be news? Because China usually reacts to negative press with a statement or a tweet. A protest letter is rare and an escalation, and that too against a specific broadcaster. It shows how worked up China is about the interview. It's a 5-page long response to a 30-minute long interview. And you don't have to read it, A, because it is not written very well, and B, because it does not say anything new. So I shall sum the letter up for you with 3 points. 1. China has accused WION of quote-unquote seriously violating the One China principle. 2. It says The People's Republic of China is the true representative of Taiwan. And 3, the Chinese want WION to stop giving a platform to Taiwan. In a nutshell, Beijing is telling us how to report on China and Taiwan. So here's our response. Unlike China, citizens and journalists of India have the right to free speech. And this includes WION. At WION, the decision to broadcast any story or interview is taken on the basis of editorial merit, on the basis of facts and reason, and not by press statements or protest letters. So we remain committed to reporting on the events in and around Taiwan. Then we come to the One China principle. It keeps coming up in China's letter to us and in China's rhetoric in general. China wants the world to respect its sovereignty. But it violates the sovereignty and territorial integrity of India repeatedly. Let me give you some examples. Number 1, this year, China claimed the entire Galwan Valley. Chinese troops have been engaged in a military face-off with India for months now. They want to claim Indian land in Ladakh. Example number 2, in 2019, China slammed India's Kashmir decision. Beijing accused India of acting unilaterally because it controls Aksai Chin. Number 3, in September this year, China provoked India again by claiming the entire Arunachal Pradesh. They call it part of China's South Tibet region. Example number 4, China protests when India builds roads and infrastructure on the Indian side of the border. Number 5, China invests in projects in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir in clear violation of India's territorial sovereignty. I have a long list and a short point to make. China repeatedly violates India's territorial integrity, or in Beijing's words, it does not respect the One India principle. How then does it expect India and Indians to uphold the One China principle? In its arguments, China hides behind the United Nations. It says the UN recognizes that Taiwan is Chinese territory. It says the UN adopted a resolution. The UN accepted the One China stand. And so there is no way that Taiwan can independently join the UN. That's all very well. But we also happen to know that China, as a permanent member of the Security Council, holds the UN hostage. It won't let Taiwan join. So the problem is with the United Nations' systems and not with Taiwan. But why is China harping on this point so much? Because the world has begun treating Taiwan as an independent country. And the more China tells the world that Taiwan is not independent, the more support Taiwan gets. Beijing's One China rhetoric is backfiring. Taiwan has managed to establish a distinct identity of its own. Unlike China's one-party rule, Taiwan is a democracy. Its leaders are appointed through an election. It has vibrant economic and cultural ties with the world. Leaders of Taiwan have pushed for a distinct Taiwanese identity. This month, Taiwan celebrated its National Day. Instead of making Taiwan's independence, the celebration commemorated a 1911 uprising. It happened in Wuhan, by the way, and against China's last imperial dynasty. That uprising ultimately led to the creation of Taiwan. The Taiwanese celebrated the Republic of China and its democracy, and not the Communist Party that rules over the mainland. Earlier this year, Taiwan also redesigned its passport. The word Taiwan was made more prominent on the cover, while minimizing the ROC, Republic of China. That's what it's officially called. The differences could not have been more clear and apparent, and anything that highlights that bothers Beijing. But there's something else that China is worried about too, the Wuhan virus and the Communist Party cover-up. During the interview, Taiwan's foreign minister told us that his country, his government, would be ready to testify against China. Can China be held accountable in a court of law for such a pandemic cover-up? And if yes, will Taiwan testify against Beijing?
If there's a need for Taiwan experts to testify or to join in this investigation, I think Taiwan will be very happy to do it.
That statement seems to have rattled Beijing. This paragraph is from page 3 of the Chinese statement, the Chinese letter. And I'm quoting, China did not cover up anything. China did not delay any efforts. Beijing has been saying this for a while now, but look at the last line. And I'm quoting again, the DPP authorities have no locus standi to claim taking part in so-called international investigation to hold China accountable. What is a so-called investigation? This is a WHO investigation. China agreed to be part of it in the month of May. No doubt the investigation is a farce now, with the WHO doing China's bidding, but now Beijing is openly discrediting this probe. Remember, Taiwan gave the first warning about human-to-human transmission. This was in December 2019. China wants to deny Taiwan a voice at the WHO, and it wants us to deny Taiwan a platform. WION's interview with Dr. Joseph Wu has been widely quoted and carried by the press in Taiwan. It has been reported in domestic and international publications. The Taiwanese foreign minister issued a response to the Chinese statement today. He said, and I quote, once again, China's diplomats try to muzzle India's free press. Taiwan is a democratic country and force for good in the world that won't be silenced. So this is how things stand. China has banned WION in the mainland. Chinese diplomats have blocked us on social media. Chinese embassy in Delhi criticizes our coverage. And now they have directly written to us, telling us how we should do our reporting. Unfortunately for China, India has a free press, and respecting sovereignty is a two-way street. And to be honest, China's tone and aggression should not come as a surprise to anyone. This is China's wolf warrior diplomacy in action, pioneered by the top leader, the Chinese president, Xi Jinping himself. Earlier today, the Chinese president made a declaration. He warned the United States, without naming it, that China's military is determined to, quote-unquote, defeat the invaders. As the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, signaled a possible military alliance with China. Our next report tells you more.
From the Great Hall of the People, Xi Jinping delivered a clear message to faraway America.
We will never sit idly by and see our national sovereignty, security and development interests suffer. We will never allow anyone or any force to invade and split the sacred territory of the motherland. Once such a serious situation occurs, the Chinese people will certainly hit them head-on.
The entire affair in Beijing today was about singling out the United States as the enemy. The occasion was the commemoration of China's entry into the Korean War 70 years ago. Better known in China as the war to resist the US aggression and aid Korea. Xi Jinping delivered his speech during the presidential debate, right when Donald Trump and Joe Biden were battling with each other to prove that they'll be the better choice to tackle China. The Chinese president wanted to signal that he is ready for any challenge and any precedent. Surrounded by members of the Communist Party, the military and veterans of the Korean War, Xi Jinping tried to paint America as the bully without naming it.
Any form of blackmail, blockade and extreme pressure will not work at all. Any act of self-reliance and self-respect and any act of hegemony, tyranny and bullying will not work at all. Not only does it not work, it's a dead end.
Tensions between the United States and China have risen on various fronts. But recently, both countries have sparred over the status of Taiwan as the PLA stepped up its military activities around the island. The Trump administration has swooped in to help Taiwan, clearing $1.8 billion worth of weapon sales. Meanwhile, Russia is looking to deepen its relationship with China, signaling at a possible military union in the future.
We can imagine everything. Our relations with China have reached such a level of cooperation and trust that we don't need a military alliance. But in theory, we can imagine it.
President Vladimir Putin revealed that Russia has shared sensitive military technologies with China. While the Russian president didn't share any specifics He did mention that Russian tech has helped China boost its military potential significantly. China and Russia are closer than ever before. With Putin now opening doors for a possible military alliance in the future, the next American president would need to keep an eye on both Moscow and Beijing. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
The fighting in Nagorno-Karabakh has entered its fourth week. Is a full-blown war imminent? Can diplomacy still work? Tonight we bring you an exclusive interview with Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. He spoke to me earlier today. Before the interview, let's bring you up to speed with the conflict. Diplomatic efforts to bring peace have fallen flat. Moscow's ceasefire was violated in minutes. The Minsk group, which tried to broker peace, could not even bring both sides to the table. With each passing day, casualties are mounting. We cannot give you an exact number, but the Russian president claims the deaths are nearing the 5,000 figure. 5,000 people have been killed in this fighting. Neither Armenia nor Azerbaijan is willing to take a step back. Baku is adamant on annexing Nagorno-Karabakh, but ethnic Armenians detest Azeri control. So what's happening on the front lines? Azerbaijan is claiming major victories. On Thursday, the president of Azerbaijan said his forces had complete control over Karabakh's border with Iran. Armenia has rejected this. Most of Azerbaijan's gains have been made shooting from Turkey's shoulder. President Erdogan of Turkey is spoiling for a war. He's recruiting mercenaries, sending them to Karabakh. There's also talk of a possible Turkish intervention. This would really be the worst possible scenario, in fact, because once Turkey gets involved, Russia will inadvertently be dragged in. Russia has a strategic alliance with Armenia. Neither side can hope for an outright military win. So despite repeated failures, diplomacy remains the best hope. There have been two major peace efforts. One, which was a non-starter, the one led by the Minsk group in Geneva, and another in Moscow. The foreign ministers of Azerbaijan and Armenia met face to face. They agreed on a humanitarian ceasefire, but it crumbled within minutes. Now the United States has launched its own mediation. The foreign ministers of both countries, Armenia and Azerbaijan, are in Washington. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has held separate meetings with both of them. And this is where the problem lies. 3 peace efforts for one conflict and yet no peace. Armenia recognizes this. The Prime Minister of Armenia told us that the United States should merge its peace efforts with Russia. He also spoke about how global organizations like the NATO, like the United Nations, have proved ineffective in such conflicts. They lack leverage, were his exact words. On Turkey, the Prime Minister was very clear. The NATO must rein in its rogue member, take responsibility for its actions. Here's an excerpt from our exclusive conversation. Hello and welcome to WION's Global Leadership Series. With me today is the Prime Minister of Armenia, Mr. Nikol Pashinyan, and it's good to have you on WION. Welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. Very glad to be with you. Thank you.
Armenia's president visited the NATO headquarters, but he seemed to have returned empty-handed, with the NATO chief saying that this alliance will remain neutral as far as the conflict is concerned. What then are your options?
Turkey is a member of NATO, and I think that the actions which Turkey is now taking in the war against Nagorno-Karabakh impose a certain responsibility on NATO as well. Today, the International Human Rights Watch has stated that Azerbaijan is using prohibited ammunitions, cluster bombs, in the Karabakh conflict zone, and these are grave violations of international law. When a member state of NATO is engaged, when a member state of NATO is transporting mercenaries and terrorists to the conflict zone to start a war against Nagorno-Karabakh, then NATO has direct responsibility. NATO must answer these questions. After all, how it feels about one of its member states recruiting terrorists and mercenaries and transporting them to a conflict zone, and secondly, taking part in a process in which prohibited weapons are being used, rocket shelling civilian population.
Would you say that multilateral organizations and alliances like the NATO and the United Nations seem to fail in situations like these?
You see, this is an ongoing problem for quite some time now, and experience has shown that those operations are not necessarily effective, and these types of organizations very often do not have sufficient leverage to impact the situation. That's why we think that in this situation, one possible way out could be the deployment of Russian peacekeeping troops in the conflict zone. And we think the international community, namely the OSCE, Minsk Group co-chair countries, should support and encourage so that the Russian peacekeeping troops are deployed in the conflict zone. Because otherwise, we will not see any specific action to prevent or stop this humanitarian crisis.
Russia did try to mediate peace. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is set to meet the foreign ministers of Armenia and Azerbaijan. So we've had a Russian-led peace initiative, now an American-led effort, two peace processes and yet no peace.
I think that the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs should bring together their efforts for resolving this issue and not act with separate initiatives. And I think it would be correct in this situation for the OSCE Minsk Group co-chair countries, which are the United States and France, to support the other co-chair country, Russia, in Russia's peacemaking efforts, and not to try to initiate separate peace processes or peace initiatives. Russia is closer to the region. Russia is present in the region. Russia has more effective tools for specifically influencing this situation.
So will you not participate in a US-led peace process if that's what Washington insists on?
We do participate, of course. We do participate. And our Minister of Foreign Affairs is already in Washington, is set to meet Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. I just explained our position that the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs should act in the same direction and not in different directions.
How long a war or a conflict have you prepared yourselves for?
The Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh, as I said, will fight till the end to defend their security, but I hope that our diplomatic efforts will stop the war as soon as possible.
Prime Minister Pashinyan, thanks very much for being with us.
Yes, thank you.
And now to Sri Lanka. A lot is happening there. The Rajapaksas are tightening their grip on power and they want to keep an old enemy alive. I'm talking about the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, or the LTTE. The Sri Lankan government has moved an appeal in the United Kingdom. They want the UK government to list the LTTE as a terrorist organisation again. The Rajapaksas fought the LTTE with weapons. Now they're fighting them with lawyers. All this began in 2019. Last year, a British lawmaker refused to remove the LTTE from the terror list. An LTTE front organisation challenged that decision. The matter moved to Britain's Proscribed Organisations Appeal Commission. They ruled in favour of the LTTE. Sri Lanka is now trying to reverse the decision. It wants the LTTE to be labelled as a terrorist organisation again. Sri Lanka's civil war ended more than 10 years back. In 2009, the LTTE was defeated. Its leader Prabhakaran was killed. But according to the Sri Lankan government, the LTTE is still alive. What remains of it, the smaller groups with affiliations to the LTTE, are still active overseas, and they are allegedly working to quote-unquote incite violence and destabilize the country. President of Sri Lanka, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, is called the Terminator by his family. Why? Because as Minister of Defence more than a decade ago, he led Sri Lanka's operations during the civil war. His brother Mahinda was president then. Together, the brothers ended the civil war. But it is estimated that 40,000 civilians also died during those operations. It seems like the Rajapaksas are still fighting the LTTE. Another major development from Sri Lanka today was this. The parliament has cleared a bill that would give sweeping powers to the president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa. It's a watered-down version of the original bill. But the opposition is not happy. They believe that with this new law, the Rajapaksas will be able to strengthen their hold on the country. The new law essentially overturns the 19th Amendment, an amendment that was passed in 2015. It weakened the president's office, it gave more powers to the Prime Minister and other government bodies. The Rajapaksas have reversed that change, meaning the president is powerful again. The president now gets the powers to hold ministries. He can sack ministers, he can hold authority over independent commissions that oversee elections, the police, human rights, anti-corruption efforts in Sri Lanka. The president will be able to control all of this. He will also get the power to dissolve Sri Lanka's parliament halfway through its term. Earlier, Sri Lanka's Supreme Court had objected to 4 specific clauses in this new law. The court said the government should hold a referendum. So the bill, it seems, was passed without those 4 provisions. The Rajapaksas have an absolute majority in parliament, 2/3 majority. The bill was passed effortlessly. The opposition is accusing the Rajapaksas of authoritarianism. They are being criticized by the United States too. This is about Colombo's relationship with China. Earlier, a State Department official urged Sri Lanka to, quote-unquote, make difficult but necessary decisions to secure economic independence. He did not name China, but Beijing got the message. Today, China's Minister of Home Affairs accused America of meddling in Sri Lanka.
The US officials' remarks are brimming with Cold War mentality and hegemony, which fully expose their usual practice of interfering in other countries' internal affairs by bullying small and medium-sized countries into picking sides.
The focus is now on the Rajapaksas. Will they attempt a balancing act between China and the US? We'll have the answer by next week when US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo pays a visit to the island nation.
We're learning to live with it. We have no choice. We can't lock ourselves up in a basement like Joe does.
He says that we're learning to live with it. Learning to live with it. Come on. We're dying with it.
I am the least racist person. I can't even see the audience because it's so dark.
Started off his campaign coming down the escalator saying he's going to get rid of those Mexican rapists. He's banned Muslims because they're Muslims. Come on. This guy has a dog whistle about as big as a foghorn.
I don't make money from China. You do. I don't make money from Ukraine. You do. I don't make money from Russia. You made $3.5 million, Joe.
Russia's paying you a lot. China's paying you a lot. And your hotels and all your businesses all around the country, all around the world.
Children are brought here by coyotes and lots of bad people, cartels, and they're brought here and they used to use them to get into our country.
They cannot, it's not coyotes didn't bring them over, their parents were with them. They got separated from their parents, and it makes us a laughing stock and violates every notion of who we are as a nation.
Look at China, how filthy it is. Look at Russia. Look at India. It's filthy. The air is filthy.
He thinks wind causes cancer, windmills. It's the fastest growing jobs, and they pay good prevailing wages, $45, $50 an hour. We can grow and we can be cleaner.
You heard what they said. You saw what they promised. The final face-off between Joe Biden and Donald Trump was very much like a debate, unlike their first meeting. The mute button did work after all. The back and forth was easier to follow. The US president managed to tone down his approach. Joe Biden stuttered less. But there was a fair dose of personal attacks and political theatrics. From the opening minute to the closing statements, Joe Biden and Donald Trump offered completely divergent views on almost every issue. The pandemic, healthcare, immigration, racism, foreign policy, climate change. They did not agree on anything. We shall discuss in detail shortly. But first, let's answer a question that most of you must have on your minds. Who won this debate? To be honest, there was no winning this debate. Not 12 days before the election, in which more than 47 million people have already voted. 47 million. I don't think either candidate's arguments in this debate will sway voters anymore. Most of them seem to have already made up their minds about who they'll vote, who they want to see in the White House. That said, let's focus on something that has been making headlines here in India, Donald Trump's remarks on climate change, because it was the only time that India was mentioned in the 1.5-hour-long debate, and not for the best of reasons. Listen to this.
Look at China, how filthy it is. Look at Russia. Look at India. It's filthy. The air is filthy. Look at China, how filthy it is. Look at Russia. Look at India. It's filthy. The air is filthy.
I can't say it like him. The air is filthy, he says with a special effect. But call it election rhetoric or his personal views, what Donald Trump said is nothing new or even wrong. India does have bad air. Just this week, the State of Global Air report revealed how India recorded the world's highest annual average concentration of PM 2.5 exposure in its air. Donald Trump may be right. At the same time, he has no moral authority whatsoever to preach anyone, including India. He is, after all, the world's biggest climate change denier. I'll give you 3 quick examples of what he has done to the environment in the last 4 years of his presidency. Number 1, he pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord, a landmark 2015 global agreement to fight climate change. Trump thinks the agreement is an unfair economic burden. He does not want to invest in fighting climate change. Number 2, he has weakened land and animal preservation projects. In 2017, Trump announced plans to slash more than 2 million acres of protected lands in Utah. 2 million acres of land. The changes allowed oil and gas mining projects in these areas. Number 3, this happened just 2 months back. In August, the U.S. Environment Protection Agency, EPA, announced its plan to roll back regulations on methane emissions for the oil and gas industry. This was an Obama-era rule which required oil and gas companies to monitor and fix points where methane, the second largest driver of climate change, leaked from factories across the U.S. The Trump administration said the regulation was flawed and an unnecessary burden on the private sector. The U.S. president should be the last person preaching another country on climate change. If you need more proof, listen to this.
I know more about wind than you do. It's extremely expensive. Kills all the birds. I know more about wind than you do. It's extremely expensive. Kills all the birds.
In other words, in other news, the Senate Judiciary Committee has advanced the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court and set up a final vote for confirmation on Monday. With a 12-0 vote, Republicans have paved the way for Barrett to fill the vacant seat and serve the Supreme Court for lifetime. Democratic senators who have been opposed to the nomination boycotted the meeting and called the process a sham. Republican senators ridiculed Democrats. They called the boycott an electioneer antic.
I find this to be a surreal environment we're in, where our Democratic colleagues announced yesterday they're going to boycott one of the most important votes this committee will have. But I just want to comment on the pictures that are in their chairs, like this is some sort of sporting event during COVID-19, and rather than show up and do their job, they choose to continue the theater that was part of the hearing.
In other news, U.S. astronaut Kate Rubins cast her ballot from the International Space Station 253 miles above the Earth. She also voted from the ISS in 2016. For Americans living on Earth, if you haven't voted already, go out and make your voice heard. Every year, yellow dust from deserts in China and Mongolia blows into the Korean peninsula. It's a regular affair, but this year, North Korea is on high alert. It feels the dust storm could be bringing the Wuhan virus along with it. citizens have been asked to stay indoors. But in Pyongyang, the scenes were quite different. Our next report is from one of the most popular restaurants in North Korea, home of the iconic noodle dish, Pyongyang Naengmyeon. Take a look at this and tell us if this looks like a city under stay-at-home orders.
This is Ok Ryugwon restaurant in Pyongyang. Established in 1960, it has defined culinary life in the North Korean capital for decades. Here you can dig into a variety of soups and noodles. But customers mostly come for one particular dish. The Pyongyang Naengmyeon. It's a cold noodle dish served with a mild broth, topped with meat pieces and vegetables. An absolute favorite among customers.
Every time I come, I get reminded that Ok Ryugwon's Pyongyang cold noodles are the best. When you eat the same food repeatedly, it's easy to get sick of it, but you never get enough of Ok Ryugwon's Pyongyang cold noodles, even if you have it 3 times a day.
The restaurant has seen its share of politics as well. In 2018, during the Inter-Korean Summit, this is where Kim Jong-un hosted South Korean President Moon Jae-in. Both leaders enjoyed a hearty bowl of Pyongyang Naengmyeon. Cut to the present. It's a Wednesday at Ok Ryugwon, and the place is absolutely packed. There are no booths separating the customers. Everyone has been cramped into a massive dining hall. Social distancing? Not so much. Among the staff, things are better. Most of them have a mask on and sanitize their hands upon entry. The reception and other common areas are being disinfected regularly. Ok Ryugwon's manager says things are under control.
We will continue to work more closely on our emergency quarantine projects while serving the people more actively, and thereby do our best to inspire the strong will of our people by the time the 80-day campaign is over.
But here's the problem. The restaurant is still operating at full capacity. This at a time when eateries around the world are shutting down over a second wave. But North Korea is yet to report a single case of the Wuhan virus, let alone a first or second wave of infections. So here's the big question. What is likely to spread the Wuhan virus more? A wave of yellow dust from miles away based on unproven science? Or hundreds of people packed into a single restaurant? Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Mesut Ozil, Arsenal's out-of-favour midfielder, has been dropped from this year's Premier League squad. The club says it's just a professional decision, but the internet is flooded with a theory that the Chinese regime could have been behind this decision. How true is this theory? Is China really a factor in the player's exile? Our next report explores.
He was once known as the most creative football player in the world. His fans called him the perfect passing machine. His name is Mesut Ozil, a German football player of Turkish descent. In 2014, he was a key contributor to his country's World Cup victory. But since then, Ozil hasn't really been at his best. For all the talent, his career has dwindled in rapid fashion, and he has now been left out of Arsenal's Premier League squad.
He has had the opportunities like everybody else. I'm sad that I had to leave 3 players out of this list.
Ozil is disappointed, and he has gone public with his feelings. He shared this letter on Thursday to express his dismay at the decision. He wrote, "I will continue to train as best as I can, and wherever possible use my voice against inhumanity and for justice." What exactly was the player referring to? His supporters say the situation of Uyghur Muslims in China's Xinjiang province. They have flooded the internet with theories that the Chinese regime played a major role in the midfielder's exile. In question is Arsenal's significant commercial presence in China. But what exactly fueled the China theory. It all began with this social media post by Hong Kong pro-democracy activist Joshua Wong. He said Ozil had been left out of the Arsenal squad for speaking up for Uyghurs. In December 2019, Ozil, who is a Muslim, put out a social media post calling China's Uyghur Muslims warriors who resist persecution. The post went viral and Ozil was taken out of several video games in China. Even his club's next game against Manchester City was removed from state broadcaster CCTV's schedule. The Chinese state media launched a massive campaign to discredit the player. They called him silly, somebody who lives in his imaginary world, and a man who will decline in influence and will pay a fair price for his words that support terrorism. 1 year on, Ozil has been kicked out of his team. His team manager says it's a purely professional decision.
What I can say from my side, that is just a football decision that my conscience is very calm because I've been really fair with him.
But the Chinese state media is celebrating. The Global Times says Ozil is reaping the consequences of his words. So, is the Chinese regime really behind the player's exile from the Arsenal squad? Or is it just a football decision? The debate continues. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. Have a good weekend. We'll see you on Monday.